Hello and welcome to Designing Worlds, the show all about design and designers in virtual worlds. I'm Safia Widdershins, and this week you find us back on the mainland, where we're going to be looking at a phenomenon we touched on briefly last season, Second Life Railways. And as a fan of the movie Brief Encounter, with its smoky railway stations and thundering passions, I've dressed for the occasion. My co-host, Elric Merlin, has already disappeared to discover more of the trains, but I'm joined here by Mansa Mayo and Marianne McCann of the VRC. Hey, all the M's with me today. Welcome to the show, both of you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Glad to be here.
Now, Marianne, this isn't your first appearance on Designing Worlds. I seem to remember that the last time you were on the show, you had me ziplining over flames at the Second Life Kids exhibit at Bern 2.
Yep, and I believe you had some fun with it too.
Oh, I did.
Yep.
It was a great exhibit. Mansa. Now, I know there are a lot of acronyms associated with Second Life Railways, and there seem to be a lot associated with real stock too sometimes. Can I ask you to be very kind and spell these out for our viewers when you're talking about them? So, for example, what is the VRC? And another term I keep hearing, SLRR.
Well, the VRC is a group of rail enthusiasts who work together to generate standards and collaborate on sharing rights of way. It stands for the Virtual Railway Consortium. It actually started out as the Second Life Railway Consortium, and we had it changed to meet the lab's IP guideline usage.
Yes.
The
Yes,
SLRR is the important acronym. That stands for the Second Life Railroad, and that's the track you'll see in Second Life that covers so much land.
Right. And they were actually laid, I think, by Linden Lab themselves.
Yes, and they're all of the SLRR proper is on public right-of-way protected land.
Right. Now, we're standing here next to a map of the Heterocera Atoll. Mansa, can you tell us something about the lines marked on this map?
Well, the map shows the SLRR track on Heterocera continent. It was a community service created by Stryker Jenkins, the Secretary of the VRC. The routes depicted are currently in operation are solid. The projected routes or possible routes are dashed. The solid red dots indicate Linden and LDPW built and maintained stations. I should explain that the LDPW is the Linden Department of Public Works, our moles, we do so much work around the main line.
Right.
The red circled white dots indicate points of general interest, and the VRC facilities are indicated by our group's initials. Now, the version of this map used on the VRC map kiosks includes a numbered list of points and line names with the color name symbol legend.
I see. There's it shows a real lot of activity going on here. And I just wondered, are the railways concentrated on the Heterocera Atoll with just a few private estates like Caledon?
Well, no, there are some other lengths of the SLRR track. Marianne should be the one to tell us about that.
Okay, Marianne, what can you tell us about the track?
There's actually a number of private lines on some of the other mainland continents, as well as the Bay City Short Line, which is on the Sansera continent to the south, which is one of the newer SLR editions. It's a bit more of an urban city rail line than what you'll see up here. And there's also a number of other trolley systems and so forth to be found.
Right. Well, I'd definitely like to take a look at that later on. I must say, we found an awesome location here. Mansa, what can you tell us about this build?
Well, all along the SLR, you'll find resident builds ranging from a roadside tavern to stations, private tracks, and other rail facilities. Salonia's build here is one of the larger ones, including a container freight yard, a locomotive works, and includes a roundhouse and a turntable, and off to the side there's an entire iron smelting facility.
Wow. I must say I'm awed by the quality of the building here. This is probably the best industrial building I've seen outside New Babbage.
Yes, it's one of the most varied and detailed VRC member builds in SL.
Well, perhaps we should take a look around here and also see what Elric has found.
Well, thank you, Safia. And I'm standing in a rather remarkable part of this whole complex here, which is actually an immense complex. It's not even slightly small. But if you look behind me, you can see, I hope, a turntable, which is somewhere that you basically turn locomotives around so they can go off in different directions, or so that you can actually just back them up onto a train or whatever. It's on the edge of this roundhouse here, which is a location where locomotives are stored, and you can see there's a couple of really gorgeous streamlined locos lurking in there. One in London North Eastern Railway colours, I think, and that would be the Thane of Fife, and another type that I don't recognise in dark blue. But on the turntable itself is something really special. Every minute you will see a new locomotive res there, and all the locomotives you'll see are the work of Salonia Stenvag, who has basically handcrafted apparently 40 classes of locomotives, and they're on show here, resing once a minute. And some of them are North American, as you can probably see. Some of them are look like British ones, and some I really can't tell exactly where they came from. I think they certainly we've got a good representation of both European and North American locomotives here. I'm extraordinarily impressed. Some of the most recent models here, and I think probably models is a good word for them because they're really finely detailed, as I'm sure you can see. Some of them are using mesh, some of the most recent ones, and we're using mesh-capable viewers so we can see them. But look at the detail on this one, for example. It's absolutely stunning. I'm really impressed by this. The locomotives cover the period of around 1840 to 1950, and as I say, 50 classes. And the setting for this turntable is pretty amazing too. If we have a look around, behind this there is actually a full iron and steel works, and this is another part of Salonia's work. It essentially demonstrates the whole process of steel making, from extracting iron ore right through to the various processes used to make steel, including things like the Bessemer converter and other technologies. And then there's all these wonderful details. There's a high level railway which runs around at kind of the second floor level, in a sort of semicircle around the edge. There are various locomotives in the yards around here, and everything is extraordinarily, exquisitely detailed. Definitely worth a visit, I think I would say. But perhaps rather than just looking at trains, what we should think about is catching one, and I think Safia and the others have already headed for the station, so let's join them, shall we?
Indeed we have. And while we wait for Elric to join us and a train to arrive, two events that I hope will be happening rather close together, perhaps you can tell me something about how the railways began in Second Life Mansa. It's a bit chicken and egg, isn't it? Were people building trains and the Lindens put down track for them to run on? Or did the Lindens decide we should have railways and people began making the trains to run on the rails that appeared?
Well, the SLRR, the Second Life Railroad that the Lindens placed, was preceded by the GSLR, the Great Second Life Railroad.
Right.
It was created by residents in the color regions of the first continent, Sansera.
Mm-hmm.
When the second continent, Heterocera, was discovered, SLRR track was spread along some of its protected land rights of way, covering about 40 regions.
Ah, so it was here right from the beginning.
From the beginning of the second continent, indeed.
Right.
The Lindens, Eric, Nigel, and Michael, set up the SLRR with regular rail service, and for several years this ran on the main line around the atoll from Baga to Tulip Tree in 3 separate segments.
Right.
Over time, a few more track lines were added, though they weren't actively served by the commuter train.
Mm-hmm.
Residents saw the rail, and some made their own trains to run on it. In time,
Yeah.
changes to the physics engine stopped the LL scheduled service, and residents began to utilize the resource more and more.
Right. So you can no longer catch a commuter train.
That's correct. But the SLR continued to grow, adding new lines and interconnecting all segments with working switches or points.
Brilliant. I hope we'll be seeing some of those as we travel on the railway shortly.
We will indeed.
Okay. How did you come to be involved, Mansa?
I had originally entered SL to do some physical simulations.
Mm-hmm.
Like many residents, was exploring Heterocera when I stumbled across the SLRR tracks.
Right.
I traced the entire route and located some interesting sites along it. At one of them, near the Hobo Hub, I found a spur that belonged to the GSLR.
Right.
I contacted one of the associated residents and asked what I could do to help. And soon I was scripting a trolley for the Cicropia to Caleta short run.
Fantastic. I think we may be seeing Caleta later on, aren't we?
I believe we will. We should make a point of it.
So what about you, Marianne? How did your involvement with the VRC begin?
Well, I was a longtime fan of the SL rails. Much like Mounds, I stumbled across them at one point. But my interest was mostly in the city areas, like the old Nova Albion trolley on the Sansara continent. And when the VRC formed, I kind of joined to represent the city regions, and I guess also having a bit of an interest in the history of Second Life and its rails.
Right. Okay. Mans, perhaps you can tell me a bit about this station. It seems quite a simple one in itself, but I believe there are more elaborate ones.
Well, there are, and sometimes less is more. This one was built in the first contest to build stations for the SLRR, in which residents offered candidates, and they were selected by the Lindens and placed on the track. This one was built by Alizar Mondrian, a well-known long-term resident in Second Life. Others down the road we'll see as we travel, and we'll see some from the second contest, in which 9 different stations were built by volunteers.
Brilliant. Okay. So I think here comes Elric.
We'll res a little trolley here to ride on.
Fantastic. Let's do that.
So, Mounser, where does this route take us?
Well, we'll curve around some and eventually head northwest towards Crumby Junction, very busy area. There we'll take the right-hand track almost due north towards the VRC Analyst Station.
Right.
Wow, it gets dark around here quickly, doesn't it?
It does indeed. But this is definitely a gorgeous way to travel. And to see the mainland, isn't it, Marianne?
Absolutely. You know, once you just grab a seat and enjoy the scenery as it rolls by. And there's really a lot of good hidden gems on this route, too.
One thing that actually interests me is how these trains actually run. The physics behind them that keeps them on the rails. I know it's very different from the way it works at home in Caledon. Can you tell us a bit about the technology, Mounser?
Well, there are 2 main modes of motion, non-physical and physical. In the former, certain element track called guides are sensed by the locomotive, and the unit guidance scripting steers toward those waypoints in non-physical motion. In the physical mode of motion, 2 main forms of guidance are used, collision guidance and sensor guidance. In collision guidance, the train slides along, runs along on the track bed itself, and steers by colliding repeatedly with the center rail, an invisible prim called the guide. This is a non-physical prim, so if you walk across the track, you'll walk up over it as if it were there, though you can't see it.
Mm-hmm.
In the other mode of transportation, in physical mode, motion, you can sense those same guides but not collide off of them. The script steers the engine towards the waypoint that's defined by the center of the guide ahead that's been sensed.
Interesting.
In Bay City, the decision was made to build the SLR segments there with a phantom guide so that other vehicles and pedestrians don't stumble over it as they will on much of the other parts of the SLR. So in Bay City, it would be difficult to use the collision guidance method of physical motion. There are tricks that would get you around it, but it's not as simple as most other scripts are for rolling stock.
Interesting. Wow. So it's a really deep technology then, isn't it? It's really sort of deep into different types of scripting and different technological approaches to how you actually do it.
Yes, and since in the physical motion there's such an intimate connection with how the Havoc physics engine runs whenever it's upgraded or tuned, or perhaps some other elements of the simulator software are tuned or changed, then the reactions of physical vehicles will vary greatly, and sometimes they have to be re-scripted a little bit, constants adjusted, or even slightly different techniques adopted.
Well, thanks for explaining all that. It's very helpful.
And now we're in Crumby. There are some amazing things here. I can see Thomas the Tank Engine. And down in the cutting to the right-hand side, I can see the most beautiful Matchbox train. So many of these works are clearly a labour of love. And there's a VRC station or centre on the left as we go up. Mansa, this is a fantastic place. There's so much here.
There is.
Indeed.
There is. And one of the things we see here is the junction provided by these switches, or points as they're known in the UK.
Ah, so how do they work then?
They are installed by one of the moles of the LDPW, Sylvan Mole, in the Linden Department of Public Works. And they are operated either by touching the signal itself or by chatting on certain channels with the command to turn to branch or to main, depending on which route you wish to take.
Ah.
Right.
Now, presumably, it must be a bit difficult knowing who should be allowed to change the points.
Well, in the beloved permissivity of Second Life, anyone can touch signal and change the routing of the particular switch or points through which you're traversing.
Okay.
And I think we've come to what is the destination for this part of the show, Aenelis.
Aenelis is another VRC station, placed it to aid our community service work, provide information, free access to the SLRR. Volunteers have done all of this work, and some of the builds are quite detailed and realistic.
It's absolutely gorgeous. Perhaps we could stop here and take a look around. I'd love to look at the information boards here.
And I'm certainly going to be taking a look at the engines in the roundhouse. But while we're doing that, we're going to be taking a short break before coming back to learn more about the railways of Second Life. So,
don't go away.
Radio Real is an internet public radio station with multiple streams on the air daily. We play an extensive variety of music for listeners with eclectic taste, from early music to Victoriana, big band and folk, plus drama and special programs. For more details, visit radioreal.org.
The best things in life are free.
Welcome back to Designing Worlds, the show for design and designers in virtual worlds. This week we're exploring the mainland railways of Second Life with our very knowledgeable guests Mansa Meyer and Marianne McCann. And we're now at Tulip Tree Junction, and it's really a beautiful piece of work, and I think one of the headquarters of the VRC. Marianne, if people are interested in this programme and want to learn more about trains and perhaps even get their own, how should they go about it?
Well, one of the best ways I feel is to come here to Tulip Tree, check out the headquarters here, or go to virtualrailwayconsortium.org on the web.
Right.
The group has a free train or two available, and a number of other resources for anyone who's interested in the SL Rails.
Fantastic.
You know, it's sort of a group of groups, the VRC, with a number of parties coming to the table.
Brilliant. Now, I can see here on the board behind me some of the other lines that Mansa talked about. In fact, we took a trip on the ONSR through the Snowlands last season.
Yeah, there's a number of different rail lines out there, the ONSR, the Great Second Life Railway, lines in New Babbage, Steeltopia, elsewhere. More track all the time, really.
Fantastic. So how many groups would you say that are involved?
Well, last I checked, I know there's something like 15 different groups active with the VRC, both mainland and private estate groups. And there's undoubtedly more that just haven't joined in yet.
That's brilliant. Okay, but now I think it's time we get back on a train and continue our journey. pause here, Mansa? We seem to have reached a rather interesting region now. I think there's a station over there with some amazing passenger trains. But there's also an area here that's very much the other side of the tracks. Can you tell us something about it, Mansa?
Well, this area shows the artworks of Arcadia Asylum, an early and very prolific expert builder, creator, texturer, vehicle scripter in Second Life, and she has left a legacy behind her like few other residents have. We see here her buildings that she wished to depict what some parts of our world really look like.
Right.
She succeeded admirably. Around the corner we'll see a museum of some of her works that are being collected in the vehicular area.
Oh,
That's
right.
brilliant.
Mm, absolutely.
She's been quite an inspiration for the grunge culture, and perhaps the most marked characteristic of Arcadia Asylum is that everything she did was completely open source and public domain.
Cool. Excellent. I really like the actual arcade with the gaming machines, the slot machines, and pinball and what have you, and all the gorgeous 8-bit sounds as well. It's really marvelous. But also on the other side, over to my left, there's what looks like a hobo area. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Well, that was started by Orhalo Zander as his own work to provide a friendly landing place for ordinary folks in Second Life who needed some help or some companionship and they're getting started. And it later became a sponsored effort that Linden Lab provided land and other resources for, and has been here for many, many years. And it's helped many a new resident to find a home and friends and get a good start in Second Life.
Oh, that's rather neat.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Yes. Now, let's head for the horizon and take another short break. And while we do so, we want to share with you some wonderful pictures of trains and railways taken for us by Wildstar Beaumont.
But we'll be back to see more of the railways of Second Life. So don't go away.
Welcome back to Designing Worlds, the show for design and designers in virtual worlds. And now we've shifted to a different part of the mainland, Bay City. Marianne, I believe you're very involved with Bay City.
Quite a bit. I was one of the first landowners here, and I've served as the leader of the Bay City Alliance, a community group for those involved with the Bay City regions, since about late 2010.
Right. Now, Bay City is a themed area of the mainland and a zoned area. What does that mean exactly?
Well, when Linden Lab made Bay City, they went a slightly different direction from much of the SL mainland. They themed the area to the American urban experience circa 1945 to 65 with Art Deco influence.
Right.
It's one of a small handful of themed areas, Nova Albion, Nautilus, a couple of others.
Right. Yes, we've been to Nautilus, and that really had some stunning builds. And people have respected the zoning here, have they?
By and large, there's always a little bit of variance. There's not a covenant on the area, but the resident group, the Bay City Alliance, does what they can to help promote the theme, and the lab has provided a lot of prefabs and other materials for people to use too.
Right. Now we're standing here, and behind us is a tram stop. Do trams also play a part in Bay City?
They do. When Bay City first opened, Linden Lab's Department of Public Works put in street trolleys, water trolleys, and a balloon tour to provide a few transit options in the area. In fact, the Bay City tracks were purely decorative until about a year or so ago.
Right. I think I can see a balloon in the sky, actually. Is that the balloon tour still going? Or is that just sort of random residents taking a balloon trip?
Yeah.
That's the tour?
No, it still runs.
Brilliant. Well, that might be a wonderful way to see the place.
Absolutely.
So why was it decided to add trains as well?
Well, I think it was a number of things. The residents of Bay City, as well as the Virtual Railway Consortium and some other parties, kind of pushed to get the lab to activate these tracks and make them usable. And really, to be fair, the Linden Department of Public Works was pretty keen to do it as well. They often use the short line for testing enhancements before they get rolled out to the rest of the trains.
Fantastic. Okay, let's go and see the railway properly. And I think I can see a rather nice stylish station. And here are Elric and Mansa too. Hello.
Hello, you two. I've been looking at the industrial building around here. Very attractive.
We've seen some stunning builds today around the railways. They seem to encourage great builds around them. Do you agree, Mansa? Of course, there are a fair few eyesores as well.
Yes, the freedom here permits all to express themselves much as they choose. So we see a wide variety of build themes. Many rail buff residents like to recreate rail as they know it, though, and it's always interesting to learn about them from their builds.
And the railways definitely seem to be popular.
It's a form of transport that is very popular, I think. There's a lot of romance about railways, the Orient Express, the Blue Train, the Flying Scotsman. Oh, and think of that marvellous Devon line that Brunel built, that he deliberately ran along the cliff so that travellers could see the spray splashing the carriages. Have you ever taken that route, Elric?
Actually, I have, yeah.
It's great, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's also the element of power in locomotives. Some of them that we've been seeing today are really quite awesome. So there's an appeal in that too. What do you think is the attraction of railways, Mansa, for you? And for you, Marianne?
Well, traveling fast and far, precision at work, memories of times gone by. It's a long list.
Yeah, I'd say there's an element of nostalgia, an element of things gone past, with a lot of trains for a lot of people.
Now, as well as talking about trains, how about riding one? I gather there's something rather fun to see here.
Let's go then.
Faster, slower. Well, can't go slower. Faster.
That's pretty good, actually. I gather the principle that drives the trains here is different from in the Heterocera Atoll. Is that correct?
Yes, there are several main types of, well, there are two main types of motion in Second Life. There's non-physical and there's physical motion, which depends on the use of the Havoc physics engine. And there are two methods, or several methods, of guidance of trains. There are two methods of guidance of trains. In the non-physical method, you use only the sensor, where you find a waypoint somehow and head to that waypoint in non-physical motion. With physical, you can have two types of guidance. One where you bang along colliding with the center rail, the invisible guide rail, and continue strictly depending on where those guide rails are. The second method is to run with physical motion, but to use the sensor method, where you locate your next waypoint and move to that with physical motion. And they all three look differently and feel differently when you're riding. In Bay City here, the decision was made not to have the non-physical guide rails, so they're made phantom, so that people won't stumble over them, vehicles won't stumble over them, and they wouldn't impede a trolley that crossed the track. That means that in Bay City, only the non-physical motion or the physical sensor-driven guidance motion is possible.
That's interesting. One thing I noticed incidentally, I don't know if you can answer this, if you take a train or locomotive that's intended to run on this sort of tracking, I notice you can't run it somewhere like Caledon because it can't find that guide rail.
Correct. That is another method of guidance that can be used either physical or non-physically, and that's called strict waypoint guidance, where a note card contains the exact route.
Aha.
And the rolling stock follows those directions as it steps through the note cards.
Oh, really? Oh, interesting. And that's presumably how they managed to define where things, where all the stops are and etc. That's neat.
Correct. You have to predefine that entire route, every detail on it.
Ah, okay.
The waypoint only driven guidance.
Oh, this is interesting up ahead.
Do we want to demonstrate this here?
Yes, please.
I believe Mary Ann was going to tell us how it worked.
Sure. It's usually in this down position, except for one trips a switch along the water, which operates both the rail bridge and the bridge over the road at the same time. Everyone basically gets to wait for Bay City boat traffic.
It's lovely. It reminds me of a very busy bridge in Boston over the Charles River, which always seemed to shoot up whenever I approached. Oh, look at it go up. That's terrific. Well, once the bridge is back, we can continue our journey, but sadly, the show is coming to an end. If you would like to learn more about the VRC and SL Railways, you can visit their website. But to be honest, nothing actually beats coming to the stations we visited and exploring for yourself.
I believe there are free engines available at some locations to help you do just that. Is that right, Mouser?
That's correct, Elric. At VRC headquarters in Tulip Tree, the VRC analyst station, and really all along the SLRR there are signs from which any resident can receive free open source trains.
Oh, neat.
They can learn from, use the builds, the scripts, or both, and make any modifications they like, or just use them as is to run the rails for their entertainment and edification.
That's brilliant. And I'd like to thank our guests, Mansa Mayo and Marianne McCann, for showing us so much about the fascinating world of Second Life trains.
Yes, indeed. It's been a wonderful visit.
I've enjoyed it, but I always enjoy getting out on the rails. So fine with me.
And I always enjoy showing off the city here. Thanks for having us.
It's been great. Really has. Don't forget that if you want to see this program again, you'll be able to catch it over the coming week on the Treat Lifestyle channel and on the Designing Worlds page at treat.tv or on the Designing Worlds blog.
Next week we'll have another amazing show for you.
But for now, we must leave you and wish you fair winds and clear waters. I think we should say clear rails as well, or something like that. There must be an appropriate railroad type expression, don't you think?
Yes, fair winds and clear rails.
You